Good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight with a little history. 49 years ago, in 1973, the American public learned that crucial evidence in the Watergate investigation into President Richard Nixon was suspiciously missing.
Good evening. The White House this afternoon disclosed that something else is wrong with the president's secret tape recordings. That an 18-minute section of a critically important conversation is inaudible, consisting only of a single tone on the tape. That conversation took place just 3 days after the Watergate break-in last year, and it involved the president, H.R. Haldeman, and John Ehrlichman.
That recording was critical because it was supposed to capture President Nixon's earliest reaction to the news of the Watergate break-in, but it disappeared into thin air. Conveniently for Nixon, it was supposedly erased by his personal secretary, Rosemary Woods, who claimed that she did so by accident with an errant foot pedal. Needless to say, the missing 18.5 minutes suggested a cover-up, and it was one of the many contributing factors to Nixon's eventual downfall. Fast forward to today, and we're learning now of a new gap in another White House record, this time pertaining to the presidency of Donald J. Trump. Only this gap isn't just 18.5 minutes. It's more than 7 hours. The Washington Post is reporting today that internal White House records from January 6th show a gap in Trump's phone records of 7 hours and 37 minutes, including the period when the Capitol was being violently assaulted. That sprawling gap, which spans from 11:17 a.m. to 6:45 p.m., represents the most crucial time frame for congressional investigators who were trying to piece together what Trump was doing while his supporters overwhelmed police and occupied the Capitol. These White House records are not just incomplete. The gap suggests staggering and potentially willful omissions, given what we already know. For instance, public reporting has established that Trump spoke with at least 3 Republican lawmakers that afternoon, including Senator Mike Lee, Senator Tommy Tuberville, and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. But none of those conversations are accounted for. No surprise, the Select Committee is now investigating a possible cover-up of the official White House record from January 6th, according to one member of the panel. Additionally, they're looking into whether Trump communicated that day through back channels, phones of aides, or personal disposable phones known as burner phones. While the omissions from the record are significant, what the log does actually show is also quite damning. Most of the names that are included are the very people at the center of Trump's effort to steal the election. People like Steve Bannon, Jim Jordan, Josh Hawley, and Rudy Giuliani, among others, who continue to stonewall the Select Committee's probe. They could be accomplices in what a federal judge yesterday described as a felonious attempt by Trump to obstruct the joint session of Congress. And yet, the Department of Justice has shown no sign that it's even opened an investigation, which has frustrated many on the January 6th committee. Here is Virginia Congresswoman Elaine Luria last night.
I will echo what my colleagues have already said, but more bluntly, Attorney General Garland, do your job so that we can do ours.
Joining me now, Barbara McQuaid, former U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst, and Nick Ackerman, former assistant special Watergate prosecutor and former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. And Nick, I have to go to you first. 7.5 hours is a whole lot different from 18 minutes. Your thoughts on this bombshell reporting from the Washington Post?
There's no question. I mean, this is deja vu all over again. We're dealing with significant evidence during a period of time when all of this mayhem was going on at the Capitol. And the real question that's looming over all of this is whether or not Donald Trump knew that there would be violence, had participated in organizing the violence, or had encouraged the violence. If that is so, there is little doubt that he would be prosecuted criminally for what he did that day. So that is the looming question here. And we have no idea what was in that phone record. I mean, my sense is, the phone record just stops at a certain point in time and then is nothing for 7 hours, which leads me to believe he put it down the toilet or destroyed it.
There also, Barbara, is evidence of consciousness of guilt. I am not a lawyer, but Donald Trump putting out a statement saying, I don't know what a burner phone is. Well, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. He says, no idea what a burner phone is. Never heard of it. Well, John Bolton says, yeah, you do. In an interview Tuesday afternoon, former National Security Advisor John Bolton said he recalls Trump using the term burner phones in several discussions and that Trump was aware of its meaning. Bolton said he and Trump have spoken about how people used burner phones to avoid having their calls scrutinized. He knows what it is. He apparently used them. If you're a prosecutor looking at this evidence, can you see how Merrick Garland could look at all of this and say, nothing?
Well, your notion of consciousness of guilt is right on, Joy. This is a classic example of it. So a burner phone is a phone used by drug dealers and other criminals. It's a prepaid, disposable phone that you can use when you don't want a call traced back to you. So you use it and you get rid of it when you're done. So did he use a burner phone? We don't know. But this statement that I don't know what a burner phone is one of those things of, you doth protest too much when you've got John Bolton who say, yes, he did. He did use that phrase all the time. So when he's saying this, he's trying to distance himself from even knowing what this thing is. And I think, as you say, sometimes that can be used as consciousness of guilt. Denying even knowing what this thing is an effort to downplay the possibility that he was using one. So it's a really interesting thing. But with regard to your question regarding Merrick Garland, I know there's great frustration that charges have not yet been filed, and there's not even an overt indication that there is an investigation going on. I agree that if I believe that to be true, I too would be outraged. And I certainly don't have any inside information, but I can't believe that the Justice Department is not investigating here. I think that people base that on the fact that there have been no leaks and also the fact that there have been no court challenges to subpoenas, the way we've seen with people like Steve Bannon and Mark Meadows and John Eastman and the like. But there's an awful lot of investigation that can be done covertly. For example, the Justice Department has access to search warrant authority that the Congressional Committee does not have. And so the Justice Department can obtain things with sealed search warrants from providers and get all of the email content in that way instead of relying on the user to provide it in response to a subpoena. So I think that it's quite possible and even quite likely that the Justice Department is investigating here. And I take Merrick Garland at his word when he says that they will investigate anyone at any level, whether we're at the Capitol or not on January 6th, who is responsible for this assault on our democracy.
Right, because it's a coup. Excuse me. Let me go back to just some of the people that Donald Trump has acknowledged that he did speak with. It's a long list. It's Steve Bannon, it's William Bennett, the people that you would expect. It's Rudy Giuliani, Sean Hannity, Katie McEnany. Steve, you can go all the way down. And just stay with you for a second, Barbara. Would this be a case where the Justice Department would go down this list of people that they know that Donald Trump did speak with and try to backfill and figure and get their phone records? Like, how would you go back and piece together who he might have been speaking with? Because this is who we know he spoke with. We just don't know whether there were any other lawmakers he spoke with. There are stories that talk about Ted Cruz's involvement. Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley were intimately involved in this congressional side of objecting to the electors, which was exactly John Eastman's plan as laid out in his memo. They were following the playbook that John Eastman laid out. There's so much here that's circumstantial that suggests that lawmakers knew what was happening, that Trump's aides knew what was happening, that maybe Mark Meadows knew what was happening, that maybe Clarence Thomas's wife knew what was happening. They all seem to have the same information, Barbara. I don't see how everyone could have come to the same idea about how to steal the election and not talk to each other. Is there any way that a prosecutor could look at that set of facts, that all these senators seem to know what is going to be done? Eastman has written it down in a memo, and everyone's acting the same way, but they somehow don't know and aren't talking? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think that that's one of those situations where the prosecution would try to prove that there is a conspiracy and different people had different input and different roles and different participation, but they were all on the same page and part of the same agreement. And there's law that says a conspiracy may be proved that it was not just an explicit agreement, but it can be an implicit agreement. You don't have to all get together in the same room and sign a document that says, here's the agreement, as long as they're all on the same page and they have the general gist of the same plan. And it does appear that that's what happened here. And as for this absence of phone records, the absence of phone records does make the prosecutor's job substantially harder here. One of the values of having a list like this is you can see who all the calls were, and then you can go talk to those people about the subject of the conversation. Now you have to piece it together by reverse engineering it and finding out from the callers themselves or the other recipients of the calls who they were. And it may be that some calls are now lost to being reconstructed in that way. But as you said, we do know from reporting and statements by the people on the other end of the line that there were lots of calls that day. So now what you have to do is piece together the content of the calls from that end of things. And that's going to be much more difficult. And finding out how is it that Donald Trump talked to all of these people and yet there's no record of it. It's either a burner phone or there's been reporting that he sometimes had a habit of just grabbing a phone from an aide and saying, give me your phone, I want to make a call, and using that person's phone call to do it, a telephone to do it. So it is true that you can put together a conspiracy even if you don't have Donald Trump being the one who's communicating every directive in this plot.